Hey folks, Machinery Pete here. I am up near Northfield, Minnesota today, and this is Vern Kelley. Now Vern, you have an auction coming up on Tuesday, which is, I believe that's September, is that the 12th? 12th on BigIron.com.
Correct.
And we were up today filming for Machinery Pete TV. Now Vern, we wish it was a different circumstance, but you reached out to me last fall. Your son, Dan, who's age 44, passed away last November 26th.
Correct.
Unexpectedly.
Yep.
And again, we had some email conversations about,
what to do.
And there's obviously choices selling it privately or auction, but
exactly.
You've got a great team with Big Iron here, and the sales on Tuesday. And how are you and Linda feeling now here as we come up to sale day?
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and so our time spent on getting it ready kind of took the emotions out of it. Today, when we were putting some pictures of Dan up for the people, the friends that stopped by for the open house, it was a little difficult because, and then of course, after talking to you, I always in my mind was, what would Dan do? What would he want us to do? And, and then his brother and sister, Ross and Valerie, they didn't have anything to do with the farm operation, but yet they inherited half this stuff. And so I want to do the best for them. That's why I reached out to you to, what should I do here? So
well, I was, just honored to be, involved here, Vern, and help you guys out. And folks, great line of equipment selling Tuesday here. Behind us, you can see a 1990 4755. I think it's got 5,747 hours. Now, interesting here, Vern, you and Dan were exceptionally close. You guys were in the fuel business together. He's your son. You farmed together.
Correct.
And you had a farm out near Leola, South Dakota.
That's correct. That's correct.
And that goes back to, was it your grandfather?
My great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
He homesteaded 1,600 acres, and then he took 400, he had 4 sons, and he gave each 400 acres and built a barn and a house.
Okay.
And ours was the last one. Okay. And my grandfather's farm, and then my uncle farmed it, and we bought it from my uncle.
Okay. And meanwhile, you're on the southern edge of the Twin Cities. You built an incredible business, Kelley Fuels.
Yeah, correct.
And Dan was involved in the business with you.
He ended up being the president.
Yeah.
And then we sold that to Staples Oil in Windham in July of last year, and then Dan went to work for Staples. Okay.
And you and Dan, when he was a young guy, and he just loved farming with Dad.
He did.
And you guys were doing 30 trips a year to the farm in South Dakota.
Exactly. And we'd get out there and it'd rain, we'd have to turn around and come home. And so the joke was that the neighbors said, hey, we need rain out here, call the Kelleys and get them out here.
Right. Yeah. But through the years, as Dan, you were busy and Dan was busy with the fuel business, but the farming was something you guys both did together.
We did.
And I mean, to the extent where, just a good son, trained well by his dad. But you said, Vern, he would call you every morning. Every day
we'd talk morning and probably in the evening, and what are you having for dinner tonight, or can you come and help me with this, or what are we going to do on the farm tomorrow, or what time are you going to be out at the farm, and I'll meet you out there, and we'll work on equipment. And it was always 2 heads are better than one. We'd start a project, and I'd say, maybe we should try this. Okay, well, let's try this. And so it was a good partnership.
Very cool.
I miss the guy tremendously.
Well, and, in this day and age where personal connection, even within families, it's difficult. But what you and Dan had was obviously something very special there, and the love of farming. Now we're here in Northfield, Minnesota, which is a long way from Leola, South Dakota. But after all those years of travel, what was it, about 5 years ago, you decided, hey, let's maybe look for a farm closer to home? Exactly.
And so Dan called a real estate agent here in Dakota County, and she had this site and 2 other farms and a bin site that was all owned by one fella, and a guy named Ben Boyum. And so we called out to South Dakota and found our neighbor and asked him if he would be interested in buying our place out there. And so we did a little 1031 exchange and bought these farms here and sold our farm out there, and then drove a lot of this equipment home.
You drove it from Leola, South Dakota to Northfield. That's a long drive.
Combines and tractors and sprayer. It was a long way, and especially with the 8640 thing, 16 miles an hour with no radio.
We will get over to the 8640 and a 8770 over there, folks. We'll do a little tour here with Vern. But if we talk about the 4755 Vern, now this, again, there was a neighbor to your farm in Leola that when Dan was young, you had him kind of spend the summer and work with the guy?
Yep, his name is Lloyd Binder.
Okay.
And he's actually kind of a second cousin of mine, and a very patient man that can do anything. And like I mentioned, he's probably forgotten more about farming than I'll ever know. And he bought the tractor new at what was then Brown County Implement in Aberdeen, and now it's RDO in Aberdeen.
Okay.
And he used it, and it was his father's favorite tractor, and it turned out to be Dan's favorite tractor. And then when Lloyd's about 4 years older than I am, and when he decided to retire, then he, now he's like 3 years older. When he decided to retire, the tractor came up for sale, and we bought quite a bit of stuff from Lloyd.
Sure.
Yep.
Well, so a second owner, and from someone who's like family, a 4755, folks, 5,747 hours on it, 90 model. Of course, these 55 series red hot. I think, Vern, when the online bidding opened on this thing, boom, it was over 34,000 instantly.
Right.
So very unique buying opportunity here, folks. And we'll talk about some of the equipment. We have a planter for sale at 1770. You and Dan picked this up over the years, Vern?
Yeah, we bought it up in northwestern Minnesota.
Okay.
And had it hauled out to Aberdeen, and we used it for corn and soybeans out there. Okay. And we didn't have a dryer out there, so we always ran into trouble in the fall. And so we finally we ended up one time harvesting corn, and there was a kind of a dew that froze, and we filled up the sieves on the combine, and I said, that's it. So we left the corn, and we didn't go corn anymore, and so we used it basically for soybeans, which was interesting because they had never grown soybeans on that farm ever before, and so then they came out with new varieties and stuff. And so it's been a good planter. We put new tires on it, put new discs on it, and got a liquid fertilizer tank on it, and it's always worked, injected right to the seed.
Well, there you go, folks. If you're looking for a planter, again, it sells Tuesday, September 12th, bigiron.com. Just look for the Vern Kelley link there. And Vern, let's take a walk down here, talk about a couple of four-wheel drives. And as we walk, tell us about Dan. I mean, he loved farming. What was it that about farming that he loved so much? I don't know.
He was just good at everything, working with his hands and with his being able to back stuff up, and he was always interested in how things worked, and when the crop would come up, he was out there to check and see how evenly it was planted, and he just enjoyed it, and he enjoyed driving tractor. He enjoyed even in the fuel business. He didn't want to be behind his desk doing paperwork. He wanted to be out in the truck hauling fuel. Right. And so I'd have to scold him sometimes and say, you get somebody else to haul that fuel. But as driver shortages ended up, Dan did way too much driving himself, but he enjoyed it.
Well, you shared a story that shortly before he passed on his birthday, last November the 13th. You guys were out to dinner. Yep. And phone rings. Yeah,
and his cell phone rang, and it was the whole family sitting there, and he's going, yeah, okay, yep. That was his big, yep. And so he hangs up, and I said, what's that? And he said, oh, a guy needs fuel out by Minnetonka, and he said, I got to take him some out. And I said, not tonight. Oh, yeah. He said, he needs it tonight. And so he got done with dinner and went out and got a truck and filled it up and took it out. And because customers always came first. Customers needed to get taken care of.
Do it now, do it right.
He would.
And by the way, Vern, we have to walk back here. There's one more feature on the 4755, folks. I think it might add some bidding interest here if we get a closer look at our front weights.
Yeah, it must have been all Lloyd had available, these suitcase weights, because all the IH on them for sure.
Was he a big red guy?
No, he wasn't, but he made do with what he had. So apparently there was some,
there you go,
suitcase weights that he found that fit on there.
There you go. IH front weights on the 4755. That's going to be a hot seller Tuesday, I think, Vern. Okay, let's walk down here. Your 8640, and we have an 8770. The 8770, you said you guys bought up in Jamestown, North Dakota a few years ago?
Yeah, we did. And It's been a good tractor for us. Dan drove that one. I drove the 8640.
Okay.
And the 8640's got probably about 500 hours on a fresh overhaul from RDO in Aberdeen.
Oh, nice.
And it's got probably maybe about 200 hours on a transmission rebuild at Kurt's Repair out in Leola.
Okay.
And it's got a 50 series block in it. And she just starts right up.
Well, folks, if
a lot of power.
if you need some horsepower, you know, we know what the new ones cost. So good used ones here, 8770, 8640, selling Tuesday. And if we go down the line, we have a couple Pete's 378s, a 2000 and a 99 model.
Yep, both with Cat 3 emission engines. Actually, it would call it an Acorn engine because they're free electronic log engines.
Okay.
The 90 or the 2000 here has got a fresh overhaul on it. Probably doesn't have maybe 300 miles on a $38,000 Ziegler Caterpillar overhaul.
And that has warranty left.
And it has warranty, yes. It's a 3-year full warranty from May 22 to May 25.
Okay.
And then also that one 2 years back, we put a complete set of frame rails in it. We had a crack in the frame, and so we took it in, and Allstate Peterbilt in St. Paul put brand new rails in it.
Well, there you go, folks. A 2000 model Pete 378 and a 99 model. That warranty new engine in the 2000 model. Click that bid button there. A couple Peterbilts. And Vern, we got a few more trucks we got to talk about here. Now, when I drove up today, this Apache.
Yep.
They will always catch your eye.
Yep.
But the 1960 Apache 20. Now this has roots back to your South Dakota farm, doesn't it?
Exactly. I used to work in the summer for my uncle when I was 17, back in 1960. He drove that back from Reeb Chevrolet in Leola.
Rube Chevrolet? Reeb.
Yeah, but a lot of people call it Rube, but it's Reeb, R-U-E-B. That's how they pronounce it.
In Leola.
Yeah, and it was my mother's cousin, Ed Reeb.
Okay.
And
I understand he also sold Oliver tractors?
Oliver tractors, yep. So, and it's kind of wherever the machinery dealer is in that town, that's kind of what everybody used. So my other uncles had Olivers too.
Okay. Now, the day your uncle drove this 1960 Apache 20 home, you happened to be there. You were 17 years old, right?
17 years old, yep.
And what do you remember about that day or thinking about this rig when it came home?
Well, it was, again, he traded cars every year, but not pickups. And so to get a new pickup on the place was pretty special.
Big deal.
And we hauled wheat in it. So he put a box on the back with a grain gate, and then it would hold 80 bushels of wheat, seed wheat.
Okay.
And then we'd shovel out with the wheat, and then we'd haul with it. So as a kid, I would drive it to the local elevator in Leola, and with 80 bushels on it, drive in the elevator, and then they had a lift on it that would lift up, and then we'd drain it out. But I was probably 13, 14. Well, no, not when we had this one. So I was 17, 18.
Okay.
And then we'd haul to the.
Now Dan, he was hoping to restore this.
That was his plan. That was his plan, was to restore it, and then it just Scott was too busy, and he'd every year he'd say, "I'm going to do it this year. I'm going to do it this year." So.
Well, so there you go, folks. Have been in the family since 1960, and now Dan, you taught Dan how to drive in this thing, right?
Yeah, and that's where the front bumper's got the bend in it, because I jumped in and he jumped in, and I thought he was going to back up, but he went forward there, and there was a big rock there.
Well, there are a few rocks out in South Dakota, aren't there?
Yeah, a lot of rocks. Your rock picker's your best friend out there.
There you go. Well, now, folks behind it, I'll raise the camera angle up here, but I think that's an 87 GMC Silverado 20. Is it a
Chevrolet?
Oh, Chevy Silverado, right? Oh, because you've always been a Chevy guy.
Yep.
Ever since your uncle drove the Apache.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and my dad always drove Chevrolets, and that one actually I bought from a friend of mine. He was a Chevrolet dealer in Cold Spring, Minnesota.
Okay.
Don Keys Chevrolet, and he had about, I don't know, maybe 1,500 miles on it, and he had a plow on it, and he would, because he was a Chevrolet dealer, he would sometimes say, "Well, I'm going to sell this and get another one." So he called me up and he says, "You want this one?" And I said, "Yep." So I bought that for like 1,500 miles on it.
So in like 88 or something?
Yeah, it was had a Western 8-foot Pro V plow on
Sure.
it. And we didn't ever plow much with it. In fact, Dan used it to drive to school. It's still got the Lakeville sticker on it on the windshield.
Now that's a good rig to drive to school in the late 80s, man.
Yep.
That's very cool. And that sells on the auction on Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
83,000 original miles on it.
Only under 90,000. Wow. Very cool. Well, let's keep going here, Vern. We've got Chevy C60 and next to it, what do we have there?
70.
Oh, a C70, right. Okay.
Yep. And I got 366 gas engines in them.
Okay.
The red one we used to seed wheat in South Dakota.
Okay.
And the maroon one for fertilizer and to load our earth seeders.
Sure.
So when we came to Minnesota, we didn't use them anymore, so they've been sitting in the closet over here. So I got them all running and got them going.
It was an interesting transition for you guys, farming in South Dakota all those years, and then coming south of the Twin Cities here to Northfield.
Yeah, we had a lot to learn. Like the basis is $1 a bushel from out there to here. So we go right to the river with our corn, and we pick up $1 a bushel. And the yield per acre out there for corn, if we got 125 bushel acre corn, that was pretty good for where we were. This corn here, if we don't get 200 bushels the acre,
right.
But when we went to buy the land, it was a whole lot more expensive here too.
Welcome to Minnesota.
That's pretty much it. Yep.
Well, Vern, let's keep going here, and folks, you can see kind of the drought stress here on the corn.
Yep.
We didn't get much rain this summer, did we, Vern?
We did not.
The sprayer, 4700. I guess I can't remember what year or hours on this thing.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I might have my sheet here. We were filming for the TV show today, and Vern, you, by the way, you did an awesome job. Thank you for your help. So I wrote down a 1998 model 4700, 3,902 hours on it.
That's probably correct. Yeah, it's got 90 foot booms on it.
Okay.
And I know we would load 600 gallons of spray in it.
Okay.
And
how long have you guys did you?
I'd say we've probably had it for 10 years.
Okay.
And we bought it from Illinois Acres out in west of Aberdeen, north of Aberdeen.
Okay.
And it's been good for us. We changed tires on it and put higher tires on it.
Sure.
And we put a new pump on it and new batteries. And it's a good machine. And it's set up for auto track.
Okay.
It's got all the steering wheels all set up so that if the globe is on the 4755, but it had the globe on it and the monitor, then it would be set up for precision planning on the spray side.
Well, again, it sells on Tuesday, folks, September 12th, 1998 John Deere 4700, just over 3,900 hours on it. Now we have a couple 40 series we need to talk about here. Vern, of course, these things always attract a ton of interest, but on the 4440 front, let's see, we've got a 78 model, just over 6,900 hours. And this, where did you guys pick this thing up?
I bought that at an auction in Mankato Implement in 1988.
Well, that was probably a Galing auction, maybe?
I'm not quite, yeah, it could have been. The dealership would run an auction every
Kibble.
Often.
Kibble out there.
It wasn't Kibble at the time. It was just Mankato Implement.
Mankato Implement, right?
Yeah,
right.
it is Kibble now, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yep.
And what did you use the 4440 on the farm?
It was our main tractor at that time.
Okay.
In 1988, I pulled a 20-foot John Deere, two 10-foots hooked together with a cedar weeder on the front and planted wheat with it.
Okay.
And actually plowed with it.
Hmm.
Had a 5 bottom international plow, 518s, and plowed with it. And so that was our main tractor. I got an 1855 Oliver over in that building. That was my first tractor. And then we just decided we were going to...
You're keeping some of your Olivers?
Yeah, I'm keeping all my Olivers for now.
Okay.
Maybe I'll have an Oliver auction sometime, but for now, I got a lot of work to do.
You know who to call if you,
absolutely.
you give me a jingle.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's Olivers always get people interested. Vern, let's go take a look at your 4840 and a couple J&M carts here. Did you guys buy these in South Dakota or here in Minnesota?
This was Lloyd's cart.
Okay.
The first one.
From South Dakota, your neighbor?
Yeah, yep. Same guy that put the 4755.
Yep. Okay.
And then when we bought that, we pulled it down here all the way from South Dakota. And then...
You drove it home?
Yep.
How many miles did you say that it was from Leola?
370.
That took a while.
It did. And then the other cart Dan bought just a year ago.
Okay.
And just in an auction. And so then we used that for harvest for last fall.
Okay.
And that was the last one. Linda took a video of it where Dan was always unloading on the fly, so I'd have to line up beside him. And we pulled that with the 4755, and we lined up with the combine. And then Dan, he'd be on the phone, and he'd have somebody in the buddy seat. But when I got beside him, it was up to him to make sure that there wasn't any spilled. And
Linda mentioned that you guys seemed totally in sync in that video.
Yeah, well, it was basically up to him. Once I got in front of him, I said, okay. Then we'd always get to the end. If we get to the end of the road, then I'd go, okay, is he going to stop or am I going to stop?
Yeah.
But yeah, and we didn't know it was going to be the last.
Right.
It was the last field, and we just finished up. She came, and that was the last field we did together.
Right. And then again, it was Thanksgiving weekend when Dan passed.
Yeah,
26.
2 days after. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's get a little look here, folks. We have a 1981 4840, 5,409 hours on it. Again, low hours, just solid tractor. How'd you guys use the 4840, Vern?
We needed to upgrade from the 4440, so I told Dan, he was 15 years old. I said, Dan, why don't you check around, see if you can find a tractor that would give us a little more horsepower. And so he called around and he found this one at Kibble Implement out in Montevideo. And he was 15 years old. He made the deal. And then we drove out there and I gave him the check. I said, as long as you made the deal, you can go in and finish. And he went in there and the guy was dumbfounded to find out that he was dealing with a 15-year-old kid. So we took it back, and that became our main tractor. And
Sure.
so we had 2 grain drills, and we had 2 9300s.
Sure.
And with cedar weeders. And so I pulled one with this and one with the 4440. And then when we upgraded to the air seeders, the 44-foot and the 38, then we used the 8770.
Big four-wheel drives.
8640.
And you were telling me that 8770, that was an auction up in Jamestown.
Yep.
You were up at the Jamestown, North Dakota to buy an air seeder.
I was.
But then Dan called you.
Yeah, he was watching online at his desk at the fuel company, and he kept saying, you got to buy a tractor. They're just not bringing anything. You got to buy a tractor. You got to buy a tractor. And I said, no, I came up here to buy an air seeder. And then, oh, you got to buy a tractor. So I'm sitting there, and the 8770 got to 25 and kind of stopped. And this was 20 years ago when the thing was probably worth 65, 70,000. And
Yep.
and so he kept saying, you got to buy it. So I started bidding, and I ended up buying it for 32,000. And we drove up later and hooked up the air seeder, and Dan drove it from Jamestown all the way to the farm in Leola.
Wow.
Yeah.
Vern, I think that's an interesting little example of the teamwork that you guys had. He knew you were up at the auction, but he was busy.
Yep.
But he's like, hey, Dad, I think you should buy that tractor.
No, and he would always, even when he became president of the fuel company, he'd still come in my office and he'd stand there in the doorway and he said, I think we need a new truck. And I said, well, okay. And you know, a new bulk truck right now, a 4500 is like $280,000.
I suppose, yeah.
And so I'd say, oh, you sure? Yeah. And so he was always still, even though he was president of the company, he would still come to me and ask for advice. And he was just a special son. There's no doubt about it.
Well, Vern, today here at the preview day on the farm, I pulled up and we were doing our TV filming, and quite a number of people from the fuel business drove quite a ways to be here, and we had a chance to visit with a number of them about Dan, and I was struck by some of the comments. One was basically, Dan really didn't work a day in his life. He was working all the time, but he loved what he was doing so much.
He did. He was a big Minnesota Wild fan, and he was very active in our Minnesota Petroleum Marketers Association. He was on the board. He was a convention committee chairman. He was on various committees to rename the association to our 100-year anniversary this year, and he was part of that, and the convention was part of that. So when he passed away, they did a special thing. They had all kinds of pictures of Dan at the convention, but he was very much involved with all these people. And
now, as busy as you guys both were in the fuel business, and then that 5 years ago, the decision, it would have been pretty easy just to say, you know, we don't have time to farm in South Dakota anymore. But what was it about Dan that made him, with as busy as he was, still wanting to farm here in Minnesota with you?
You know, he just liked driving equipment. He just liked driving trucks. He liked driving tractors. And of course, I got to say, when I was younger, you know, you get in a big, powerful tractor, and it's a nice morning, and it's cool, and you got the air on, or you don't have the air on. You're going up and down, and you're smelling fresh earth, and you know, that, I think that passed off on him. And all those years he worked for Lloyd out there, Lloyd knew how to farm, and he passed that on to Dan, and he just didn't want to quit. He wanted to try something new, and he wasn't afraid to try something new. We were part of AgStar Comp here at the time. We went to all the seminars. Dan tried to learn how to buy, hedging, and all that kind of stuff, how to sell. And so he was always interested in precision farming. When that started, that's when we put the auto track on the 4755, and he no-till. He started no-tilling our corn into our soybeans, and out there that was unheard of. So,
well, Vern, one of the things when we first started talking, and again through the difficult, you know, losing a son, one thing that I've found over my 33, 34 years doing this is that, you know, the auction itself, like we're standing in front of this 4840 now, yes, it's a 4840 super condition, but it was Vern and Dan's 4840. And I think the folks who will buy the equipment on Tuesday on the BigIron.com auction, whether it's that grain cart or the combines down there, folks, or the four-wheel drives, I think a piece of the story of Dan goes to the buyers. And that's why I really wanted to, you know, and I appreciate your time telling us about, you know, your farming career with Dan and the equipment and how you guys used it. Because again, folks, you're buying some really high quality stuff here from a father and son who did it the right way and loved doing it. So now, Vern, I don't know, could we maybe duck inside and see some of those pictures of Dan? Are they?
Yeah, I don't know if they're still here.
Or they maybe took them. Okay.
Maybe Linda took them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, no worries there. We'll have those in the TV show,
okay.
Vern. But again, Dan was a huge Minnesota Wild fan.
He was. We had season tickets, and he'd always go to just about every game, and he had on the wall in his office, he had signed jerseys and all that stuff. So.
Was he actually, you were telling me he was actually buried in a Minnesota Wild jersey?
He was buried in his Wild jersey, yep.
Well, with season tickets, one story you shared, Vern, I found really interesting, is that, you know, tons of friends, but he would often call Dad hey, Dad, you want to go to the game?
He would, and that was always special to me that he would, especially at the end, Staples Oil had behind the glass, right behind, or on the glass behind the goal.
Sure.
And it was awesome seats. I mean, you would sit there and there would never be a dull moment because they were fighting in front of you.
You could hear them talking.
The glass. It was just special. And more than once he'd call up and he'd say, Dad, you want to come with? And one night we took my wife's car because it was easier to park in the ramp. And so he left me off, and he always had a big ring of keys, which he lost over here in the field, and so then I had all new keys made up for him. Anyway, so he'd taken the keys out and he'd throw them on the floor mat of her car, and so then he had the camper still out here, but he was living in the house, and so he got home here and he didn't have the keys to get in the house. So I got up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom, and so I checked my phone, and here he'd left me a message, and it was like 1:30 in the morning. He says, I'm sleeping in the camper because I can't get in the house. So I got in my car, and I drove out here at 1:30.
Wow, that's awesome.
And I left him the keys, but I didn't wake him up because I was afraid if he sleep. So then I sent him a text. The keys are in the mailbox if you want to go in the house. So
That's awesome. And that camper, I should tell people, Vern, that's also selling on the auction.
it is.
It's
It is
very nice.
It is a nice camper, and he just used it for 2 months while the renters were leaving the house. And it's a special item there that makes somebody a good home down in Florida or Texas or here.
It's a 2011 open range 4240 RLS fifth wheel camper. And again, check it out, folks. BigIron.com. It sells Tuesday. It's a beautiful rig.
Exactly.
And again, all this equipment just fantastic. There is one more item on the auction Tuesday we need to go look at, Vern.
Okay.
The 34 Chevy.
Oh yes. Yes. Dan bought that at an auction last September, a year ago right now.
Up in Glencoe?
Yeah, up in Glencoe. He bought a 74 Corvette and the 34 Chevrolet, and he joined the Minnesota Hot Rod Association, and he was going to go to some of their special meets, and we were at a football game for my grandson, and Dan says, "Hey, can you go to Glencoe with me next week?" And I said, "Yeah, sure."
What's going on in Glencoe?
Yeah, and so he said, "Well, can Linda go too?" And I said, "What do you need in Glencoe?" Well, I bought 2 cars down there, and this is one of them.
There's one of them, folks. The 1934 Chevy Master Coupe 2-door. And you did not know that he was going to buy this thing.
I did not. No. And he was always going to restore that 60 Chevrolet, and he just didn't have time. So he thought, I'm going to buy something that's already restored. It's got an L98 Corvette engine in it and some kind of special automatic transmission. And it's got air conditioning. It's got a special radio system, stereo system in it.
And the trailer?
And the trailer goes with it.
And you got to drive this back from Glencoe.
I did. And he was ahead of me in the Corvette, and whenever I got too far behind him, all I had to do was step on it.
This thing's got some giddy up.
Oh, boy. And the tires on it are so wide that it's got a special wheel well in the back just to accommodate the tire.
Well, Vern, you probably got a few head turns when you're driving that baby home, huh?
Yep.
And that color blue, man.
It's a pretty color.
That's fantastic. Well, Vern, thank you again so much for
thank you.
Giving us the tour. And again, I wish the circumstance were different, but again, I know that the folks who buy this beautiful equipment that you and Dan had, they're going to get great equipment Tuesday on the BigIron.com auction, and hopefully, that the spirit of Dan and his love of farming, I know, will go on with these buyers, and the memories you have farming with Dan. That was a very special relationship. Thank you for sharing the story. Yeah. And
it's my pleasure. And the thing about it is that you have to remember that had Dad not passed away, we'd be farming right now with the same equipment. So there's nothing wrong with the equipment. It's just that, that I have no use for it anymore with Dad not being here.
Right. Well, thanks again, Vern. And before I wrap up here, folks, I maybe turn over to my friend Josh Euland with Independent Sales Rep with Big Iron. And Josh, thank you for your help with coordinating everything with our filming today. Josh, if you don't know, folks, Josh is a neighbor of mine. He lives in wonderful town of Millville, Minnesota. And what's the population in Millville today, guys?
100 people.
And Josh, and this is? Ashley. And did you grow up in Millville, Ashley?
I did, yep.
And Josh, you grew up in Blooming Prairie.
Correct.
Okay. Well, there you go, folks. It can work. A marriage, Blooming Prairie and Millville. It does work. Now, Josh, again, thank you for your help working with Vernon, getting the sale going here. Obviously, we wish it was a different circumstance, but the quality of equipment is there. And again, the sale is Tuesday, BigIron.com?
Starts closing at 10 a.m. Tuesday.
10 a.m. Tuesday. Okay. And you guys, great quality pictures, BigIron.com, and love how you guys do videos there. And anything else you want to add about the sale, Josh?
Any questions, reach out to Vern and myself. If you want to come look at something, don't hesitate to call and come take a look.
Okay. Sounds good, Josh. Thanks again for your help. And Vern, we'll be with you in spirit on Tuesday.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
Yeah, again, thanks for sharing the stories. And folks, we will have special episodes of Machinery Pete TV coming up. We'll talk more about this great sale equipment and Dan and Vern here. Thanks again. Hey folks, Machinery Pete here, up filming YouTube preview video for the Vernon and Dan Kelley auction in Northfield, Minnesota next Tuesday on BigIron.com. And at the preview day, man, what a treat. Baldy's Barbecue here, world-renowned out of, is it Lakeville?
Lakeville, Minnesota.
And here this is Brian
Wheeler.
This is Baldy.
Baldy, yeah, a.k.a. Baldy.
And I love the truck. Brian, this, of course, our Minnesota Gophers here, and we've got Sky Umar right up there. You actually work with the University of Minnesota?
Yep, I feed all the sports at the U.
Fantastic. Yep. And what, now, you are set up, what location?
So we have our brick and mortar in Lakeville. It's called the McStop. It's a truck stop.
Okay.
We seat about 140 people there, and then we have 2 food trucks.
Nice.
And then we have a new restaurant in Lakeville as well called Baldy's Tailgate Bar.
Okay. Well, folks, if you're up around the Twin Cities there, Southern Metro, you got to check it out. And specialty-wise, what if they come into Baldy's, what should they be trying?
Brisket and ribs.
Brisket and ribs. Folks, you like great barbecue, this is the man you got to see. Thanks, Brian.
Yep.